In the more recent years, Death Stranding has come to be known as a pretty good game. Its review score is definitely much higher now compared to its initial release, in which it did have quite a polarizing launch. You had some people praising the story and setting of the game and respecting Kojima as a creator, but an equal amount of people also thought the game was quite boring, with bad pacing, awkward gameplay, and a convoluted story that made absolutely no sense. Well, I'm not here to tell you that they are wrong. I'm still going to attempt to defend Death Stranding. I'm going to focus on 3 major issues I've heard about in this game that many people have personally told me, as well as creators that I've watched online, have had issues with. Not so much to debunk these issues, but more to provide an explanation on why certain elements exist in Death Stranding. I'm not trying to dunk on anyone, simply just to offer a different perspective. Maybe by understanding Kojima's process a bit more and the reasons behind some decisions that are part of the game, it will shed some light and maybe make some more people appreciate Death Stranding, or even better, give it another shot, especially if you only played the PS4 release. I myself have played the original release as well as the director's cut. I know it's not a perfect game, and I don't aim to talk objectively about why it's good or bad. I simply want to talk about some elements people have had issues with. I'm also going to refrain from huge story spoilers, which I understand is going to make my argument weaker without direct examples, but I want to convince people to play this awesome game and to go into it as blind as possible. With that being said, many know that the world of Death Stranding is beautiful, the music is great, and the game for what it's worth is an experience unlike any other. But what stops people from fully enjoying the experience that is Death Stranding? Well, there's the 3 major issues that many people have talked about. The game's pacing, the convoluted portrayal of the world of Death Stranding and its characters, and its easy and repetitive gameplay that makes it boring. Let's start with the first major issue, the game's pacing. Now, I'll not be the first to admit that Death Stranding has a slow pace. It is a core and essential part of the game's philosophy. Death Stranding really is one of those games where if you're a big lore fan, you can really sink your teeth into a game that gives you so much back. The game's pacing works in the same way that the film series Alien does. The films in the Alien franchise are well known for their slow pace and tension building that pulls you to the edge of your seat as you discover more about the crew, the xenomorph, and the universe at large. These encounters and tensions built up within each film are so impactful due to the careful pacing. The co-writer of Alien, Ronald Shusett, talks about the importance of a slow pace in an interview with Script. Then there is the careful balancing act of revealing just enough to make the reader wonder what's going to happen next. Revealing too much information allows the reader to predict what happens and deflates any suspense or tension that has been built up in the script. Basically, the story needs time to get you connected to characters, and this is really any story. It needs to drip feed lore to you and let tension build. Now, if you were overloaded with knowledge on how everything works and the nature of the xenomorph and the universe at large, it would ruin the journey and tension that's built up throughout the film. Death Stranding works the exact same way due to its setting. It hits you in the beginning with a bunch of lore words, hooking your curiosity as you begin to wonder the true state of the world and what the Death Stranding even is. How has humanity survived this mysterious phenomenon? What is the nature of the BTs? What are BBs and what is their purpose, among many more questions? Now, if all of these questions were front-loaded with answers at the beginning of the game, it would remove all tension and anticipation of the journey. This is why Death Stranding is separated into chapters, focusing on specific characters, which I think is a really great way to lay out this game. By doing this, we slowly get answers to 1 or 2 burning lore questions. This does just enough to satisfy your curiosity and understanding of the setting, and it simultaneously leaves you with more questions to help keep you curious, making each revelation a gratifying moment of your playthrough. Throughout Death Stranding, you'll witness people with their own agenda, people going behind each other's back to complete objectives and confirm suspicions. And these scenes mimic many of the discussion scenes we see with crewmates in Alien. This slow, purposeful pace extends outside of cutscenes and into the walking segments of Death Stranding's gameplay, which are also a critical part of the game's tension building. After having these cutscenes that reward you with lore and give you even more questions, you're then dropped into this barren form of America. As you walk around and worry about the immediate threats like the time-fallen mules, you also start to wonder about what you've just witnessed, whether it be in a boss fight or in a cutscene, and you might be wondering what's going to happen when you get to your destination. Well, you could argue that these walking segments could be trimmed down to focus on the climactic events and instead let tension build throughout the game's amazing cutscenes. This actually goes against Kojima's design philosophy for Death Stranding. Kojima said himself that he wanted the game to have a more realistic type of travel, to help build the atmosphere and give players a real look at what it means to go on a long journey. In an interview with PlayStation Access, Kojima touches upon the point of travel in Death Stranding.
ゲームができてから何十年と移動っていうのがほとんどそこはリアルじゃなくてゲーム的にデフォルメされてるんですね。だいたいプレイヤーは ヒーローで空を飛んだりものすごく速いスピードで走ったり大きなジャンプをしたりっていうキャラクター主人公がいっぱいいたんですけど、デス・ストランディングがそうじゃなくて、移動する、歩く楽しみというか、逆に言うと歩く難しさというか。
By having a challenging traversal system with a realistic type walking experience, it grounds Death Stranding's journey and helps build that tension to the answers you'll uncover. Death Stranding's pacing is slow, yes, and in my opinion, that's a good thing. I love the fact that I have time to think about the state of the world as I walk around, slowly interrupted by BTs and time-force segments. I love the fact that there's so much to ponder and so much mystery that there is quite a bit of confusion at the beginning, because getting those discoveries later on is incredibly satisfying and you feel like you've just seen a bigger picture of a huge conspiracy. I'd much prefer a game that shows and knows it's complicated and takes its time respecting the player and the source material than having a story that was cut down and rushed to make it a little bit more simplistic. This is such a core part of the game as well. If you change the pacing, change the style of Death Stranding, well, you don't have Death Stranding. As said by Kojima himself, it's a core part of its identity, and in my opinion, is why it works so well. Now, whether this style of gameplay and pace is for you is an entirely different question. I just simply want you to understand its purpose and why the pacing itself is slower, and maybe in doing so, you'll give it a shot with a different point of view. But on the other end, the journey and its pacing won't be enough if you don't even enjoy the story, the way it's presented, or the characters that inhabit the world. I personally think the story of Death Stranding is a pretty simple concept for most people to grasp their head around. I think the main issue that Death Stranding really has with its story are the characters which drive it forward, as well as their dialogue. A lot of these characters are very quirky, to say the least. Just to name a few, you've got Deadman, Die Hard Man, Fragile, Heartman, Higgs. Just the names of these characters alone are incredibly on the nose for the characters, and for some, that breaks immersion. A lot of these characters do talk very on the nose as well.
No BTs, no void outs, no bullshit. Just a good old-fashioned boss fight.
In my opinion, this is done intentionally. The codenames for these characters are almost a wall for themselves. Deadman is called that because, well, he has no beach, no afterlife. He is made of cadavers, quite literally a dead man, and is so obsessed with the afterlife and is doing what he can to help everyone else. Heartman is an endearing name, almost like a superhero. He's the beach scientist, the man who dies every 21 minutes and searches the beach for 3, as he attempts to uncover the mystery behind the Death Stranding, in the hopes to save humanity from extinction and to reunite with his loved ones. Mama is an intelligent woman who has isolated herself due to her unique condition of having her baby that passed away during childbirth still attached to her, now born as a BT. All of these characters are like mythological people in the world of Death Stranding, people who are so devoted to helping others and reconnecting the world that they are given these heroic codenames. And goofy and on-the-nose codenames are something Kojima has always done. Just take a look at a plethora of characters in Metal Gear Solid. Quiet, The End, Fat Man, Psycho Mantis, just to name a few. These characters and their codenames projects the nature of Kojima himself, and especially in Death Stranding, and they really shine. For my own personal theory, I believe that a lot of these characters are physical manifestations of the 5 stages of grief. Sam being denial, Cliff being anger, Hartman being bargaining, Fragile being depression, and Higgs being the twisted form of acceptance. They all portray quite a different attitude toward death to reflect our own human ideas and inner turmoils about it. To compare it to another incredibly earnest piece of media, let's take a quick gander at Twin Peaks by David Lynch. Twin Peaks' plot is quite easy to wrap your head around. It's a mystery show about a small town with many secrets and a killer on the loose. Twin Peaks' characters are all very well known for their incredibly simplistic personalities that reflect basic human emotions in a easy to understand format that helps you connect with these characters and the overarching themes that David Lynch is trying to portray. Take Leland, for example, a devoted father who lost his loving daughter, being so sad and depressed that his hair turns white. Let's look at Dale Cooper, a man who loves his job so much and a lot of spiritualistic aspects that he portrays it with almost a childlike wonder. He loves simple things like nice black coffee in the morning and making sure that you have a treat once a day. These incredibly honest archetypes of people juxtaposed with the supernatural elements makes the show such a memorable yet quirky experience that is completely unique to his own and has inspired so much other pieces of media, including Death Stranding. Kojima, of course, being a big fan of David Lynch, is very evident within Death Stranding, and Guillermo del Toro, another director and the character who's also modeled for Deadman, thinks the same. In an interview, he said this.
I think that Kojima emotionally is quirky. It's not that he's ironic. He's the same as Lynch. He believes in the possibility of love and humanity, but he also believes in the coldness of brutality, or the spectacle of machines destroying buildings. He's made of all these things, and he's not afraid to juxtapose them.
Guillermo del Toro nailed this description of Kojima's style, especially within the context of Death Stranding. Kojima is not afraid to make these characters completely honest people and juxtapose them with such a harsh reality. Where there are some goofy references here and there, to me that just adds to the experience of these heart-on-the-sleeve type characters. This is especially evident in the progression of the protagonist, Sam's character. This is something people have also had an issue with. At the start of Death Stranding, Sam is a very cold, awkward man who barely says anything, and often the conversations feel very one-sided. In fact, it's well known that he has a phobia of being touched. Sam is in denial about what happened to his family, what is happening in the world, and is in denial that by reconnecting humanity, we can be stronger together. Being he is such a cold and distant character, people find it hard to connect and resonate with him because of his lack of input in the cutscenes. They feel like they are so one-sided and monologues just for Kojima's favorite actors. The thing with Sam is, he is not like this for the entire game. He is the character with the most amount of growth and human connection. As the game goes on and Sam connects with more and more people, seeing how many people believe in him so honestly and earnestly, he can't help but open his heart up to everyone again. Norman Reedus himself states this in a point about Sam's awkward, closed-off nature.
When people play, the game is about connecting, right?
Right.
And so when people play that game in the dark, they want to relate to the character, like really relate to the character. So there's so much Normanisms in that game.
It really is you.
It really
in many
is
ways.
me, yeah. It's funny because like the character he's so closed off, and he just like leave me alone, and he doesn't want to touch people. And slowly, as you play the game, you start to feel yourself open up as the character opens up.
Sam being quite similar to Norman Reedus really helps illustrate the point of the truly human characters in Death Stranding. You know, if you even just watch a handful of interviews of people who have worked on the game, you can really see the passion and drive that everyone has for this project. You can really see how much they've put themselves into the game. All of these amazing characters, artists, directors, animators, musicians, they help the story of Death Stranding. It is such an amazing journey to see if you're willing to put in the 30 or so hours to see the game's conclusion. Coming back to our point about pacing earlier, having Sam's growth be slow throughout the game as you start to see him open up makes the entire arc, and the arc of other characters, so satisfying to see play out. Sam's progression is one of the best parts of Death Stranding, seeing him go from someone who really doesn't care about society to being the one that connects it all. Once you understand that these are completely honest and on-the-nose characters, it makes Death Stranding a massively human experience about loss, about death, and being open with oneself. It's not just a chiral connection, but an emotional and physical one that all the characters go on. The quirky nature of these characters are essential to Death Stranding, as if we didn't have their truly honest nature, we wouldn't have a game that is dripping in the indomitable human spirit. The world needs humans to live, to thrive. Humans are makes the world what it is, and without them, without those connections, well, there is no world. This is something I believe Kojima is trying to reflect within the characters and the story of Death Stranding. Thinking about the importance and nature of these characters and its importance within the context of the story, the same can also be said for its gameplay, which some call repetitive and simple. The biggest complaint I've heard about in Death Stranding is the lack of depth and difficulty in regards to its gameplay, being boiled down to just a basic walking simulator with annoying tripping and cargo management mechanics, and very frustrating enemies to fight that become trivial. Let's take a look at the first major complaint, the long stretches of walking where seemingly nothing happens. I have talked about it a little bit before, but there's more than just simply traversing the landscape. You've got mules, BTs, you've got to organize your cargo correctly where the autocorrect doesn't always work, all within the time limit and with no help from any players until you connect to that next major point. The slower, methodical nature of travel helps emphasize that human aspect that Kojima wishes to have in a more realistic journey. And traversing the world itself is such a unique experience. While there are a lot of action-packed segments, despite their easy difficulty, which I'll touch upon in a second, I personally think these long stretches are actually integral to Death Stranding's pacing and message, which I did mention earlier on in the video. Death Stranding is supposed to make you feel lonely, abandoned almost. You are the last beacon of hope in this world that is teetering on the brink of extinction. These long stretches of walking actually remind me a lot of the game Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus does have a lot of similar aspects to Death Stranding, once you think about it. There's a heavy emphasis on lore and traversal in both games, and there's a huge amount of downtime between set pieces to ponder the state of the world. Especially in Shadow of the Colossus, you're thinking about the woman you've brought with you, the true nature of the Colossi, among many other questions. The environment and world you explore in Shadow of the Colossus is a character in itself. Its wide open spaces and empty nature just as important as the colossi that inhabit it. It's this empty nature of the world with the remnants of civilization that I really enjoy, and I see that reflected a lot in Death Stranding. The Death Stranding world is also a character, just as haunting and empty as Shadow of the Colossus, and just as integral. They both share similar boss styles and set pieces as well, like the nightmare fights with Cliff and the huge Higgs boss battles. You can't help but appreciate both Shadow of the Colossus and Death Stranding. They both allow themselves the space they need to have a greater emphasis on the overall atmosphere and plot of the game, making every element, from its gameplay to its characters to its music and world, all a compulsory part of the experience. This is especially true for the BTs and their encounters in the Timefall areas, which many people complain are incredibly frustrating, and later on they become somewhat trivial because they don't really put up much of a fight. This simplistic nature of BTs, especially from a gameplay perspective, is actually done with a purpose in mind. In an interview with PlayStation Access, Kojima touches upon the nature of BTs.
っていうのは、サムを攻撃しようとして来てるわけじゃないんですね。彼らは死んだあの世に行った人たちで、まあ未練があってこの世にで残っているので、やっぱり人を見ると寄ってくるんですよね。なので手形をつけるんで、今言ったその悲しくなるっていうのは僕の計画通りで。
Understanding BTs this way can help them be put in a whole different light. While yes, the larger BTs, the ones summoned by Higgs, are quite hostile and might be trying to hurt you, the average BT simply wants to reach out and connect. You see this reflected in any Timefall area, where they simply grab awkwardly onto Sam as you try to walk out of the tar puddle, and it once again reinforces that theme of isolation and loneliness and connectedness that is at the core of Death Stranding. Imagine if every BT encounter was just a typical hostile enemy encounter full of danger. The curiosity you'd get from learning about BTs wouldn't be so emotionally impactful as it is, like the scenes with Mama and her baby, for example. We learn through Mama that BTs aren't necessarily a threat, that they were once human and are also deserving of empathy and even love. We learn similar things through Heartman and his obsession with the beach, a man so desperate to find his family, to understand what a beach is and why they exist. Through him, we learn about the nature of the BTs and extinction events, and from a design perspective, it really helps bring home the major theme of connection. BTs also represent that even though loved ones might be gone, they are never far away. Kojima said so in an interview with GameSpot.
BT と人間もお互い見えないんですよ。で、あの世と接続するとちょっと中から見えるんですけど、要は生と死があって、まあ皆さんの中でも大切な人が亡くなったりしてると思うんですけど、両親とか友達とか死の世界に行ったとしてもやっぱりどっかにいるはずなんですよ。見えてなくても。なんでそういうつながりです。生と死っていうのは切り離せないというか、ずっとつながってるっていうのを分かってほしい。
I do hope these few points help you understand Kojima's visions for BT a bit better, as they helped me understand their somewhat docile nature. They're quite similar to the Colossi in the way that some of them aren't really hostile, they're just curious and are trying to really figure out the state of the world and where they even are and how they fit in. The BTs especially are just looking for a connection, for that human aspect in life that we all crave. And I think that's pretty awesome to implement, not only within the story, but in its gameplay as well. All of these moments make the beach and BT these interesting mystical beings that wouldn't really work if every single one was just immediately aggressive. The aggressive enemy role falls to the mules, which are groups of cargo-loving enemies that want to steal everything. They once again have a similar issue to BTs. Early on, they don't really offer a challenge, with mainly just their own fists to fight you, and I think it's a shame that many people don't get to see the more advanced mule camps, which actually offer more in terms of gameplay variety and difficulty. Later on, they'll have more advanced scanners which you can actually cancel out with your Odorek. Sometimes they'll have turret positions, guns, ranged stun spears, vehicles to chase you down. They become more akin to camps in MGS5, albeit a more basic variant, and you have to prepare for them in your loadout the same way. You've also got firing range drills, racing, time limit restrictions you can personally put on cargo. There's so many modifications and extra parts of Death Stranding you get to experience after those initial cargo missions that really ramp up the gameplay and make it so much more than just a simplistic walking simulator. Yes, the walking parts in Death Stranding are slow and methodical, but they are crafted with purpose to tie to the overall themes and gameplay. Yes, the BTs are simplistic in nature, but they are done so in a way to create a conversation around them and add more mystery, not just in the game, but within the sphere of people playing them. The mules, nightmare, and boss battles are amazing and offer a more traditional gameplay experience almost as a reward for getting through the slower segments of the game. If you stick with Death Stranding and try to think more about why things are the way they are in the world, not why they are more like a traditional game, you start to develop a deeper appreciation, not only for Death Stranding, but for the process of its creation. At its core, Death Stranding is not trying to be like a mainstream game. It is just trying to be itself. This is something that even if you don't enjoy or like Death Stranding, I feel like you can appreciate. It's honestly quite rare these days for developers, especially ones with such a big budget, to take a risk on a game that really has no basis, no field testing to see if it would be received well. We've gotten an incredibly rare game with Death Stranding, almost like lightning in a bottle. An incredible cast, composer, team, artist, and of course director that has created something truly unique in the modern gaming sphere, something which unfortunately becomes more and more rare these days. This is a huge part of why I love Death Stranding, not just for its interesting world and story, but for what it represents. A spark of creativity and passion in a world where gaming is slowly becoming centered more around profits each day. Even if you go away from this video not playing Death Stranding, as long as I've helped you understand some of the technical and creative reasoning behind its design choices, I'll be happy. I hope you can see why its methodical, slow pacing is essential to its character, as it gives the game room to breathe and allows it to build the necessary tension for great payoffs, just like an Alien. I also hope you can see that the incredibly quirky and earnest characters are honest portrayal of humans, and are also essential, their quirky and awkward nature helping to betray the true nature of humanity, just like in David Lynch's Twin Peaks. That the gameplay is simple yet nuanced, done purposefully in a way to create a stronger conversation about grief, connection and death, and to help you dive into a world and become more connected not just with the game, but with the others that have played it. Death Stranding is not a game for everyone, and that is perfectly okay. I'd rather have a game that was true to itself, down to its core that only a few select enjoy, over a watered down version of the team's vision that, while it may have been better received, loses some of that personality and flavor that gives it its signature taste. Now, if you're still wanting to consume Death Stranding but not play it, might I recommend perhaps read the novelizations. There's actually 2 of them, and they're both pretty easy reads due to them having to have a lot of translations. They expand on a certain few characters as well, especially Igor, and you learn a little bit more about what Sam's thinking and some of the other characters as well. It's a semi-decent way to experience Death Stranding's story, but you still definitely need a basis on what the game even is in order to fully appreciate it. In whatever way you do or don't consume Death Stranding, I hope that you've come away with at least a better understanding and even some appreciation for the game itself. I hope you enjoyed this defense of Death Stranding, my friends. I've been Guacaman, and before I go, I gotta remind you to keep shredding. See ya!